Really? I haven't seen you in like, yeah, like 3 years ago. Well, no, I mean, a year and a half ago, but, and then I got...
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to Magers and Quinn this evening. Is there anything better than being at a reading the day the book comes out? For a debut novelist, let's put a round of applause. People have likened this to birthday, anniversary, you name it. Big events in people's lives, and we're very glad Magers and Quinn is able to share this with Rebecca. Just a little talk about how it's going to go. We're going to have a reading and a Q&A, and then after that's done, Rebecca will go up front and sign at the glass case, and we'll have an orderly queue coming to the back of the store. So give us a second to get up there after this, and then we'll start the signing. So, all right, let's get started. Rebecca Canner's writing has won an Associated Writing Programs Award and a Loft Mentorship Award. Her stories have been published in numerous journals, including the Kenyon Review and the Cincinnati Review. She's a freelance writer and teaches writing at the Loft Literary Center here in Minneapolis. Tonight we are celebrating the publication of Sinners and the Sea. The St. Paul Pioneer Press calls The Sinners and the Sea riveting, and PW says Canner animates a harsh, almost dystopian world of fallen people struggling to survive. Noah's unnamed wife is powerful, memorable, and proves her strength and character as she tries to protect her family from the outside forces that threaten. Canner successfully undertakes a formidable task, retelling a familiar religious story through the eyes of Noah's wife. Let's put our hands together now for Rebecca Canner.
Wow. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thanks to Magers and Quinn, and especially Aaron Rosenberg, for having me here tonight. I'm going to read a chapter. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read a chapter called The Giant versus the Sea. I do not know if it is day or night, or if day and night exist anymore. I do know I am dreaming, because I am surrounded by grandchildren who have not yet been born. I tell them of the flood and the tragedy I witnessed after Harai boarded the ark. I tell them of the Nephil. I say nothing of the people who tried to climb up the side of the ark and what Jacob did to them. I tell them, God was drowning all the beings of the world from weakest to strongest. First pregnant women and infants and toddlers who had been separated from their mothers were knocked down by the sea. It covered the ground and rose so quickly that you would have thought countless days of unbroken downpour had passed between the flashes of lightning. People were swallowed whole. When the 10th flash of lightning lit the world, all the pregnant women and motherless infants and toddlers were gone. The next people taken by the sea were those who fought each other for the trees and clung to them like lovers. Men and women alike were layered upon their bark, holding on to each other's hair, backs, and legs, their feet not more than a few cubits off the ground. The water came for them. Injured mercenaries, whores, and children just like you, who were probably strong enough to have climbed higher, if only there had been time. By the 20th flash of lightning, the sea had eaten the tree trunks and all those who clung to them. A few people made it to the very tops of the trees. Their fate was cruelest of all. They could climb no higher. They could only wait. Wind pruned them from the treetops until just the strongest remained. They heard people below screaming, and then they heard the crashing of the sea. Worse than hearing the people scream was listening as their screams were abruptly silenced. With each flash of lightning, those on the tops of the trees saw the horrible power of the sea, and yet they may have welcomed the lightning. More terrifying than watching death come for you is knowing it is coming and having to wait for it in darkness. The sea reached up from the earth and consumed the trees and all of the people without rafts. Rain continued hurtling down from the heavens. It hit us so hard it felt as if it were being thrown. I never knew how sharp water could be. When the lightning came, we opened our eyes to see what was left of the world, and the rain slashed us nearly blind. On deck, the sea mounted our ankles and rose to our knees. Yet the ark remained on the ground, even as people on rafts floated past. Soon, though, the sea started to come not just from the sky, but from the center of the earth as well. Children, the ark was huge, 300 by 50 cubits. Can you think of anything heavy enough to lift that much gopher wood, filled with all the species of the world, off the ground? No number of men or beasts could have raised the ark from the earth, yet as easily as a strong wind lifts a feather, the sea lifted it. The wind and the dark carried us we knew not where but far. Our eyes were of no use in the darkness, even when we dared to open them against the blades of rain. Everything was black, even us. I did not believe that we would ever emerge. But then flashes of lightning started coming closer together, one flash quickly mounting another. I risked my sight in order to open my eyes. The lightning was unlike any you should ever hope to see. From unbearable darkness, we had entered into unbearable light. That was when I saw one of the Nephilim. His torso was larger than 20 men across and 10 high. It looked as if he were wearing a skirt of thrashing water. His eyes were black with rage as he smacked at it. The sea turned a few of his nails backward and ripped them from his body. But still he slapped at it, bloodying it with his leaking fingers, turning it pink and then red. How must this grandson of God have felt, dying at his grandfather's hands? I doubt he had ever encountered anything he could not smack away, anything he could not hurt or kill. There is no sound sadder than a giant crying. We are used to babies and women and sometimes men crying. But when a descendant of God cries, the world cries with him. The clouds shook from the strength of his sobs. His tears were added to the water that sought to drown him. Would it drown him before he could pull the ark into the sea or punch a hole in the hull to drown us? Our ark had no sail, no rudder. We thought we were taking our last breaths as the wind began to hurl us toward him. Uncle Ham was yelling at me to join Shem, Ona, Harai, and Zilpha below decks, but I could not take my eyes off the giant. "Take up your weapons," Uncle Japheth yelled. Your grandfather knew there was no use in trying to fight one of the giants with weapons, so he prayed. He prayed for our lives and the Nephil's death. I prayed for all of our lives. To of every creature, I cried up at the God of Adam. Perhaps he did not hear me over the pounding of the rain. As we came within 30 cubits of the giant, I could sometimes see his face through the rain. It looked like separate pieces of clay slapped together. His nostrils flared 5 cubits in either direction, and each of his eyes held enough fury to win a war. But maybe not this war. The sea he was smacking away fought against the sea that carried us toward him. Waters clashed beneath the ark, raising us as high into the sky as the top of the tallest mountain. The goat meat in my stomach rose into my throat. For an instant, we were perfectly balanced on the wave. Then the giant started losing. The sea he was smacking away could not hold back the sea that rushed toward him. "Hold on," Uncle Ham cried. I still remember the blink of an eye in which I was suspended in air before we started to fall. It was the feeling I'd had in my head since Grandpa Noah started speaking of the flood, and finally it had spread to my body. Then the bow of the ark tipped toward the giant, and we were falling face first into the sea. As we plunged, I gripped the hatch's handle with my hands. The rest of my body lifted into the air. I had never swum before. I had never even been in water up to my knees. The sea slapped my eyes harder than hands can slap. It entered my nose, mouth, and ears, and filled the inner passages of my body. I could not breathe. There was no room for air. When the ark righted itself, water from the bow spread across the deck. The sea fell from my back, and if I'd had the strength, I would have stood up. But the water in my body did not go anywhere except deeper. My lungs were drowning inside me. Footsteps splashed over the deck. Uncle Ham lifted me and pressed his fingers between my ribs until I gave up enough of the sea to gasp for air. Ham tried to open the hatch and push me down the ramp to the second level, but there was a sudden thwack upon the hull. We were thrown against the wall of the deck where the giant's hand had hit it. He drew his hand back to strike again. "We mean you no harm," I called to him. But the waters and the wind were hurtling us toward him again, and Uncle Japheth gripped a spear that was drawn back as purposefully as the giant's hand. The giant looked at him with bloodshot eyes and hit us, once more knocking us against the deck wall. Somehow Uncle Japheth kept hold of his spear. "You'll get us killed," Ham yelled. "Is no one else man enough to defend the ark?" Japheth yelled back. He was as enraged as the giant. "You cannot defend the ark with spears or swords or daggers," Noah said. "We must pray." I took my eyes off the giant to look up at the sky. "Why do you pit the ark against the Nephil? Do you mean to save only him or us?" When the giant drew his hand back again, the waters were crashing higher against his chest. He did not know how to swim. There had never been an opportunity to learn. Until the flood, water probably never reached waist high upon any giant. His great chest was heaving with anger and exhaustion. This time, when he hit us, the sea caught his elbow. Instead of winding back his arm to strike, he reached over the wall of the deck. His fingers were wrinkled prunes of flesh, and they bled where the sea had torn his nails from his body. The fingers were coming down onto the deck. We rushed from their path, all but Uncle Japheth. He bent his knees deep and braced his spear against the deck. "Children, you see the lines on your own little palms? They crisscross and form triangles. The lines of the giant's palm seem to form a perfect target in the center. This was where Japheth jabbed the spear with all his might. The giant's lower lip fell so that his huge mouth lay open, yet no sound issued from his throat. A tear big enough to drown any one of you rolled from the outer edge of one eye. He raised his hand up with the spear stuck through the palm. Japheth kept hold of the spear and was lifted off the deck. He jerked his body around, trying to free the spear. Blood poured not just from the giant's fingertips, but from his palm as well. I yelled at Japheth to let go of the spear. When he didn't, I grabbed his legs. No easy task, considering the force with which he kicked them. I was lifted from the calf-deep water on deck, almost 10 cubits into the air. My weight was not enough to unhook Japheth's fingers from the spear, or the spear from the giant's palm. He drew his hand back, and Japheth and I dangled over the sea. It smacked up at my feet, then rose to my legs and then to my waist. My tunic tangled around my thighs. "Please," I called to the Nephil. "My father, your great-grandfather, said that Nephilim do not see well, but the giant's eyes met mine and gripped them despite the tossing of the sea." He lifted his hand higher and raised it above his head to get a better look at me. Japheth flailed his legs. "Let go so I can kick him," he screamed at me. If I let go, I would fall into the thrashing sea. But I could not keep hold of Japheth's wet leg as he tried to shake me off. I did not have far to fall. A wave rose up to meet me and carried me with it as it crashed down to rejoin the sea. The cold knocked the breath from my body and seized my heart. The deep pulled me near. I do not tell them that the sea wanted me the way a man wants a woman. I could not rise. I could not breathe. You might not believe me, children, and I hope you will never know for yourselves, that the sea's greatest weapon isn't its violent crashing or its depth. It is the cold. My mind was losing its sway over my hands. If you have ever been underwater for long, you know it's as hard to keep your mouth closed as it is to swim through the center of the earth to the other side. Without my permission, my lips unlocked and my jaw stretched wide, seeking air in whatever warmth the air could provide. This time the water did not stop at my lungs. It filled every organ, every space, every passageway, even my veins. The God of Adam is going to let me drown, I thought. I knew I was the least needed of all those God had put on the ark. Noah was the prophet of his word, and our sons and daughters-in-law were tasked with repopulating the world. I could clean and weave, but so could everyone else, even Noah and my sons, if they could bring forth the necessary humility. As for cooking, we had dried meats, dried fruits, and nuts, foods that needed little preparation. Perhaps my rations should have been divided among Noah and the children instead. My body panicked, but my mind was done fighting. Please keep my sons and daughters-in-law healthy, I said, and spare this giant. Red descended through the swirling sea. The giant's hand, the one without the spear in it, was coming closer. Then the giant lowered his head into the waters as well. He looked down at me, and our eyes met again. I was too cold to be afraid when he pinched me between his thumb and forefinger, cracking one of my ribs, as a man would accidentally crack the shell of a small beetle he picked up, no matter how gentle he was. The giant's balance was unsteady. Giants are known for stumbling and sometimes taking out whole villages beneath their feet. Yet he was able to bring me toward his face. He began to choke just as I was. Why has he lowered his head into the sea? I wondered. A current caught him and smacked him sideways. Without his feet on the ground, he could not regain his balance. Still, he pushed me toward the surface, but the sea refused to let me leave. My giant struggled to his feet, his footfalls raising the deep. Sand swirled around us. The sea was growing taller, rising over my giant's head, but he refused to fall. He lifted me up, and I broke the sea's surface. Air, there is nothing so delicious in the entire world. The currents grasped him now. They jerked him first in one direction and then another. Still, he kept me above the surface of the sea. Ham, Shem, and Harai were pressed against the wall of the deck. Ham and Shem screamed, "Mother, Mother!" My whole body choked on the sea and the cold, and I did not know if I was going to survive. Yet I felt a speck of joy to hear my sons calling to me. Ham held one end of a rope and tossed the other end toward me. The wind knocked it back into the ark. He tried again, and again the wind returned the rope to him. I leaned toward the ark, stretched my arms in front of me, and prayed. My giant heard my prayer. We began to move toward the ark. The faces of my family became clearer to me, and all seemed to contain the same emotion: hope. As we came within 10 cubits, their expressions changed. Though they were happy that I was near, the giant's arm came near as well, and it would smack against the hull in the next few breaths. My body was trapped in his fingers, but I leaned my head back to signal him to slow down. By this time, though, he had little say where we went. The water climbed higher in search of me. I suddenly knew what the people who had made it to the tops of the trees felt: a breath of utter helplessness, followed by the wailing of a small wild part that refuses to give up. The wailing unleashed itself into my limbs. My mind had taken hold of them again. Even before the water reached me, I began beating my arms as if I could push it back down. My head was not far from the hole, my feet not far from the sea. Both closed in on me. The giant did not let go of me as the sea rushed over my legs and mounted higher to my breasts. The side of my head knocked against the hull, and I felt what little warmth was left in my body bleed out of the gash in my ear. That gash turned into the scar you see now. My arms and legs stopped moving. As the water rose over my nose, I said goodbye to my family. Then I was buoyed up and tossed skyward. The giant released me into the air. "Grab the rope," Uncle Ham called down to me. But my hands no longer worked. I was at the mercy of the sea, and the sea has no mercy. God of Adam, before you kill me, please let me see my family one more time. And then I grasped the rope. A rope burns without flames, but burns nonetheless. I did not feel it at the time. I felt the wind and the cold, and the smacking of my body against the hull, and then the hands of my family pulling me over the deck wall. Fingers pressed into my aching ribs, and my stomach heaved and sent up pieces of the sea. "Japheth," I asked. "We pulled the fool from the sea, and now he sharpens another spear," Ham said. "For what?" As soon as I wondered this, the giant must have pushed off the bottom of the sea. The surface of the water, already greatly chipped from the rain and heaving in the wind, now shattered. The giant's hand reached toward us, trying to grasp the wall of the deck. Can the ark keep us and the giant from drowning? That was a question for which I did not have an answer. The side of the ark tipped toward the sea with each attempt the giant made. When he finally gripped the wall, his bloody fingertips touching the deck, Japheth rushed forward and stabbed the giant's wrist. First with a spear, then with a dagger, then with a sword. The huge hand released the ark. Japheth tried to reclaim his weapons. "I command you, let them go," Grandpa Noah said. This time Japheth listened. My sons joined together to hoist the giant's half-limb hand over the wall. The God of Adam must have helped them. Now both of the giant's hands were wounded. I peered over the wall with what little strength the sea had left me. I saw only waves crashing. When the waters stopped thrashing, I knew they had digested the giant. If they could bring down the Nephil, I knew that not only he, but all the world outside the ark had been murdered by the sea. I lay down on the deck. The rain was like a stampede, and I wanted it to trample upon my head until I could not feel my heart. For a while, I did not want to be awake to witness any more tragedies. I heard someone telling me to get up, then telling someone else to get me up. Then I heard nothing. But children, I must wake now. There are animals to tend and water to bail. I just wanted you to know, in case I do not make it to the new world, of the great giant. He saved my life. He and all of his kind are gone now. Or maybe not. The world is bigger than we can see all at once. Big enough, perhaps, to hide a giant. Does anyone have any questions?
Just raising our hand for it. How did you choose this particular story in the Bible as your inspiration?
Well, this actually begins the section on Noah and his ark, talk of the giants, and then they're not mentioned again until after the flood. So somehow a giant made it through to the other side, and I became very interested in them as I was reading it and trying to think, well, how did they make it through, and what were they like, and yeah, one thing just led to another, and that's why they ended up taking up so much space in my book. Was that an answer to your question?
I was thinking more the whole story. I mean, why
Oh.
Noah and his family? Why that part of the Bible?
Oh, okay.
What does it mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I went to Talmadore Day School as a girl, and we discussed many of the women of the Bible, but we never discussed Noah's wife, and so I was trying to think of why that might be. And I realized it was because she didn't have a name, so we didn't really have a way to talk about her, and so I went about changing that. Yeah.
So what, when you write your next book, is it going to be religious fiction or something else? Or have you even thought about it?
I've thought about it and written most of it, yes. It's a biblical tale with kind of a hint of Game of Thrones and the other Boleyn girl. Lots of palace intrigue. And I think that's all I'll say about it for now.
I'm curious about the giants. What propelled you to bring them into the story of Noah, or were there Old Testament references to the large giant, or?
There are two times that the giants appear in the Old Testament. They appear at the beginning of the story of Noah and the flood, and they're just mentioned. And then they appear in Numbers, the 4th book of the Old Testament, and again, they're just spotted, they're just mentioned. So it's really odd that there's just, these two mentions and there's no story around it. So I made a story.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Does someone have a camera so I could take a picture of all of you?
I already did that.
Your father.
I got one here.
I already did that. Did it.
Should I just walk it
Here's
around?
an actual photographer.
Okay.
This is Stephen Lang. He's also a writer and an artist. And he made my author photo enough pixels or something that they could use it.
Okay, now it's the one for Rebecca, so.
Look like you're enjoying
Yeah.
yourselves. Oh yeah, look moved.
A little serious. Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, I have a question.
Oh no.
So you talked about giants, and at the end you mentioned something about, I can't remember the exact word, but there were no more giants, but then maybe, were you implying that there might be giants spiritually, great people?
No.
Open it up, that's where my mind was.
Well, thank you, Dick.
I like that you didn't say that's a good question.
Well, her age wasn't mentioned. I mean, she didn't even have a name, so much less an age. But in Sinners in the Sea, she's much younger. I mean, she could call him like great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa, because he is 600 and she lives a more mortal lifespan. So I think Noah lived to be 900 and, I can't remember, 930 or something. But in my book, she only lives, you know, I'm going to do math, like 19 plus... I'm not going to do math. She lives to late middle age. Yeah, I think it wouldn't be uncommon for a woman to be much younger than her husband, and, you know, for a man to take actually a girl for a wife. But in my book, one of the reasons that she has to be married to this crazy man is that she is 19 and she's unmarried, and she has this mark upon her that keeps her from being marriageable, and this one man who doesn't care, and that's crotchety old Noah.
Was there a happy marriage in your book?
Well, she says that she doesn't always like him, but she loves him. And towards the end, they do have a lot of tenderness towards each other. And I won't ruin the end, but they do have, yeah, a very, very tender moment.
What's your writing process like?
Well, I get up and I drink a lot of coffee and hope it goes well. This book went surprisingly well. I was like, can this be any good? Because it's really easy. And I think it was just that I kind of traveled around, you know, and writing things down until I figured out who she was and her voice, and then she kind of carried the story, and I just wrote it. So that was really nice, and I'm hoping that will happen again, but it's not. It's not happening right now. So yeah, I was pretty dedicated. I woke up every morning and wanted to write, and did whatever I needed to make sure that happened. Well, the first draft only took about 9 months, but then I decided I wanted to rewrite it after my agent had accepted the version I didn't like. So that took a little negotiating. Actually, they were very good about it, but I had to quickly rewrite it. You know, I told them, oh, I've rewritten it, which wasn't true. I was rewriting it. And they said, oh, great, give it to us on Monday. And this was on a Friday. So that was a rough weekend. And then once a publisher accepted it, you know, they had some things that they wanted me to change, and I didn't change all of them. They were really good about it, but so that took a few months, and then just it goes back and forth a few times with the publisher. So I would say all in all, it probably took a little over 2 years.
Just curious, what kinds of things were you changing between the first draft that you didn't like and the second draft?
Well, in the first draft, she was just incredibly ugly, and that's why she had to marry Noah. And I wanted something a little bit more mythic and strange, and so I changed the second draft so that she has this birthmark on her head that in a time before science is seen as a demon's mark, and that's the reason that she has to marry Noah. And so I didn't just get to change that one detail at the beginning.
Right.
It needed to be rewritten.
Though it influenced her character and the
Yep.
whole.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. Mhm.
Thank you.
I was curious, I enjoyed the book and Magers was good, I liked your short story. And I was just curious, do you see possibly writing a screenplay for this book? Selling it to Hollywood?
I would like to see someone else write a screenplay for it after it's out.
But you haven't sold it yet.
No, my agent is working on it. There's a Russell Crowe movie coming out in March of 2014 called Noah. So that will help with the paperback sale, hopefully. My publisher has moved the paperback publication up to February to milk, all the publicity from that. But my agent still thinks it's possible to sell the film rights, just because, now all this hype with the Bible and a lot of biblical retellings that hopefully someone would want to option this. So if you're here looking for something to option.
Is there any conflict between Noah building the ark and the way she sees that, or is she on board with his mission right away?
Well, she thinks he's crazy, so she's not on board, so to speak, right away. But I won't spoil anything, but as the flood comes closer, the townspeople who have been making fun of Noah, for building this ark, and the families start to believe that there is going to be a flood. So that's when their opinion about Noah changes, because up until then they see him as kind of, a little bit nutty, and then they see him as a little bit nutty, but not all the way nutty. Oh wait, Vicki has a question.
Oh, I was trying to explain your book to a friend of mine today, and she wondered where you got the story, how you knew that. And I just rolled my eyes, and then I told her that you have a burning bush in your front yard. Do you?
In my mind.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I think, just experiencing the Bible during my formative years, it's in me. I tried to get it out before and I couldn't. So I really liked the opportunity to rewrite the story from the woman's voice, because there were times when I thought, the Bible is so sexist, and I don't want to promote the Bible, and I thought, I love the stories of the Bible. I just want to rewrite them.
All right.
Oh, Alyssa.
What were some of the things that the publisher wanted you to change that you argued against changing, and then they let you kind of have it your way?
Well, my publisher wanted Noah's wife to get more of her strength from Noah, whereas I saw Noah as something she had to endure, and that struggle made her strong. So that was the main thing, and my publisher just completely understood. It was suggested, and I didn't want to say no outright, so I said, let me think about that. And then I gave them the draft, and it wasn't there, and they liked the draft, so all went well.
Good for you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Amen.
I was Giants. I was thinking about that film rights. Because when she was reading, I could Jennifer Lawrence should play. Yes. Yeah, Katniss with the mark and everything.